What's going on, guys? This is the Otaku Table. We're back here today with some more table talk. Today's series, Yamada and the Seven Witches. Now, as you may have noticed, I am by myself today, and as I mentioned in my intro video, that will happen occasionally, but we'll be back with some friends discussing some more series here in the future as soon as possible. Now, let's dive right into this. Let's get started talking about why Yamada and the Seven Witches is so important to me as a series, and why it was monumental in shaping the anime watcher that I am today. So, when I first got into anime, when I first started watching different shows, reading different mangas in this world of anime, this otaku lifestyle that I started to live at that point, I was reading a lot of things in a certain genre, and I'll discuss that a lot farther down the road, probably in another video. But a lot of things had the same tag to it, or the same genre, or they just kind of revolved around the same thing. And when I first read Yamada and the Seven Witches, which was a manga long before it was an anime, it just hooked me from the get-go. It was crazy. Chapter 1 just hooked me, and I stormed through the manga. I think there were about 100 or so chapters out of it at that point, and so I read through all of them in like 2 days. And then from there, I started following it weekly. So every week, a new chapter would come out. I'd read it like immediately, and then I'd go back to waiting for the next manga chapter for another week. And that happens a lot with anime shows, of course. When you're watching new shows that come out in that season, you wait every week for new episodes. So it's not uncommon for everything out there. But it was such a good story that I literally was dying for the next chapter as soon as I read the one before. So it was huge for me whenever it was coming out. So it is finished now, and it ran for about 240 chapters of a manga. And somewhere near the end of that, or even right afterwards, they announced an anime that was coming out for it, which of course got me extremely excited. I was so excited to see an anime adaptation for the manga that I loved so much. So now where this gets really important is, as I said, I was reading a lot of things in a certain genre. And it was Yamada and the Seven Witches that kind of broke me out of that into a bunch of other genres and kind of led me in a new direction with all the anime and manga that I was reading in my life and I'm watching, of course. So let's give an overview of the series, and then we can kind of go into further detail and discuss why it was so important to me. So you start out with Ryu Yamada. He's the main character of the show, and hence Yamada and the Seven Witches. And he's a delinquent in school, so he causes trouble, he gets into fights, he doesn't go to class, he sleeps during class if he does show up, he always leaves early. All those typical delinquent behaviors. Now, we also have Urara Shiraishi, and she is the class genius, best in her class. She's probably the smartest and best student in the entire school, to that effect as well. So they're like polar opposites in a lot of facets. And Yamada doesn't hate her per se, but he isn't so fond of her because, as I mentioned, he's a delinquent, and he doesn't like seeing someone so into school. So in the beginning of the series, he's walking up a staircase and he sees her, and he just kind of infuriates him to see her just nonchalantly going about her business in the school. So he walks up the stairs, and he kind of bumps into her on purpose. So when he looks back to see her reaction, thinking she might be intimidated or scared by his behavior, she gives him this ice-cold glare. I mean, it pierces into your soul, the stare that she gives him. And thus he trips and he falls down the stairs, bringing her down with him. So, a pretty common incident there. Something like that could easily happen. Now, where it really gets interesting is when he wakes up in the nurse's office. He's got a light concussion. And the nurse explains, when you fell down the stairs, you hit your head, you had a concussion, take it easy for a couple of days. Now, that all sounds pretty commonplace as well, until he realizes he's actually in Shiraishi's body. And that just spawns the entire series. That's where everything kind of picks up pace. So, as the title Yamada and the Seven Witches implies, there are 7 witches in the series as well as Yamada. And Urara Shiraishi, of course, is the first witch he comes into contact. Now, from here, we're going to discuss a little bit more things. So if you're not into spoilers and you haven't seen the series, definitely pause that video right now, go watch the series, go read the manga, and then come back and continue on with this video from where we're at right now. So, as Yamada goes through trying to figure out these witches' powers that Shiraishi has, which allows him to swap bodies with them, they use it to their advantage. Sometimes she'll take tests for him, sometimes he'll help her out with this or that, and it kind of catches the attention of some other characters. And so they gain a couple. They join the Supernatural Studies Club, and they gain a few other friends that kind of follow with them, and are also helping them look into these witch powers. And they get into all kind of crazy situations and hijinks, and they eventually find all of the witches, and they use their powers for good for the most part. And it's just a really, really heartwarming series. So the anime adaptation covers about the first 90 or so chapters of the manga, and does a really good job. Honestly, I mean, when you read something like a manga or a comic or even a book like Harry Potter or something along those lines, your imagination runs wild, and you kind of imagine how things would look and how things turn out. But seeing things animated or in film just it just changes everything. I mean, it's amazing, the seeing things like that, moving, talking, the sound in the background, music. I mean, it's amazing. We can all relate to that, I think. So the anime adaptation was great. It was wonderful. It really, like I said, adapted the best part of the story, the first 90 or so chapters, which was the best section of Yamada and the Seven Witches. Now, having read all of the manga, I can say that it probably goes on a little bit too long. So that is one drawback that the manga does have, and it's a very small one. So I really can't complain too much, because even though it does drag on a little bit, like a lot of series tend to do at that point, it does add a lot of new, fresh things to it. It kind of comes full circle with some crazy backstory that relates to what first happens and what you first see in the series in the first couple of chapters, and it really kind of blows your mind if you're really into the story like I was. So you don't get that with the anime. Like I said, it only covers the first section, but it is, again, the best section. So if I had to compare them, there's the anime falls into the pitfall that a lot of series fall into, and that is that they have to cut some things out to get into the 13 episodes, or the 12 episodes rather, that the series does hold. So when you read the manga like I did first, and then watch anime a couple years later, it doesn't really stick out as much. But when you watch the anime and read the manga side by side, you really notice how many things they left out of the anime that aren't important. I mean, a lot of them aren't important to the series, but some of them just add a lot of really cool story moments to the show, or to the series. One of these examples being in the manga, Yamada runs into a girl who's in charge of the archery club, and I believe her name is Kirishima. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, but Kirishima. And she's a really cool girl, so he gets sent by the student council to go convince her to give approval on something. And it's not important at all to the main plot. It really isn't. I mean, it's something really cool to read, but if you take it out, you're not going to really miss having it in there like they did in the anime. But it's just really cool to see more of this series. It's so good. It's so good. Do yourself a favor. If you haven't watched it and you're still here, if you haven't read it and you're still here, go watch it. Go read it. And then come back. Please do it. So, as I said, they cut a lot of things out, and they also made changes. So when you cut things out, I completely understand that you kind of have to cut things out. Sometimes they aren't important. You can't always have every detail of the manga in the series. Occasionally you can. A good example of that is Shokugeki no Soma, which has every detail of the manga in the anime series, which is really cool. But you can't always do that. So I understand that, where it's coming from. I understand why they have to make cuts. What I can't stand is when they really change things, no matter how minor, just to kind of move the plot along faster so they can get the series trimmed down to where they need it to be. And a good example of that in this series is a time when Yamada and Shiraishi are having a conversation with two of the other characters that are main stable characters in the series, Ushio and Otagiri. And so they have a confrontation. They find out Otagiri is a witch, and at the end of it, after everything's resolved in the manga, Ushio comes by. He hands Yamada a notebook and says, "Hey, here's information on the witches, and you should take a look at this. It will help you a lot since you are kind of, deeply involved in this." In the anime, however, Otagiri hands it over and talks to him about it. So this is monumental for me because it kind of displays these two characters in different roles depending on which format you take this in. So in the anime, it looks like Otagiri is just being really nice and appreciative that Yamada helped her out. And so she gives him this notebook saying, "Hey, there's a lot of useful information. Use this the best you can." While Ushio is just in the background, kind of like, her servant, subject, whatever, her lapdog. But in the manga, when you read it, Otagiri doesn't know that Ushio gives it to him, or at least you don't see that. So you see Ushio's like softer side. He's really appreciative to Yamada for what he did to help him and Otagiri out. And you kind of see him say, "I appreciate that a lot. Take this notebook and use it." And Otagiri, meanwhile, she's a lot more pompous in the manga, and you see that in that instance as well, where Ushio has to do it because you don't think Otagiri would do it. And it makes a big difference, I think. And it's minor, really, but it's minor in the big grand scheme of things, but it's making a big difference in how you see these two characters, in my opinion. So there are a couple of things like that I didn't agree with. One thing I can agree with, and if you don't want spoilers, this is definitely the time to stop. One of the big things that they do change that I really am a fan of in the anime is the ending to the series. So in the anime and the manga, Yamada eventually gathers all 7 witches and he performs some kind of ritual. And in this ritual, he can make a wish and it'll come true. So both times he wishes that everyone would regain their memories, which is a big part of the plot, and that the witches' powers would be gone. So in the anime, that happens, and everyone gets together at the end, and they have a good time, and it's a really happy ending. And then you go off, and Shiraishi and Yamada confess their love for each other. They get together, and the series is over, which I love. I mean, it's ambiguous. You don't know that they stay together, which as I mentioned last week's video, I hate ambiguity like that. But it fits, and in my heart, I know that those two characters are together forever. Especially having read the manga where they do go into more detail, which I do like. I don't like how they did it in the manga, but I do like that they go into more detail and show you the future. Now, in the manga, once you get to this part where Yamada makes his wish, it's not so done and over with. They get their memories back. They lose all their powers, all the witches. But then they find out there's 7 more witches, and they're back at square one, and they're searching for witches again, and it's just, like I said, it drags on a little bit, and I like it. I could read this for years. I could read thousands of chapters of this series and probably never get bored with it. But like I said, the anime ended on such a good note, and if they had ended the manga right there, I think I would have been really, really happy with it as well. So that brings me to my next point. As I mentioned, Urara and Yamada, and they get together, they confess love for each other. And there are a lot of good characters in this series. So all the characters, all the main characters, all the supporting characters that are around a lot, they're all really well done. The only character I really don't like is Otagiri, but even she fits in really well, and she's really well done as a character. So you really can't complain too much about it. Now, that being said, there is one character who sticks out above the rest of them, who just is amazing in every facet of her existence. And I'm about to take this next step into like my otaku life and really kind of just gush about an anime character, but Urara Shiraishi is amazing. She's perfect, And as I read this series and watched it again, I fell in love with her as a character. She's so great. Her personality is wonderful. She's extremely loyal, especially to her friends. She's fierce. When she believes in something, she really, really goes out of her way to make sure things happen, to make sure that, you know, what she wants done gets done. And it's it's awesome. And she's intelligent, she's beautiful. I mean, she's an amazing character. I could sit here and I could gush all day about her. And I'm not going to do that to you because that could be like a separate 5 hour video if I really wanted to talk about how much I love her. But it is important to know that, like I said, all the characters are so well done, especially Shiraishi. And there's so much more I could say. I'm sorry. Go watch the series. Go read the series and make your own thoughts. Make your own mindset about all of this or what I've talked about. Now that being said, what I do recommend is if you're going to do one of the two things, whether it's watch it or read it, if you're going to do one of those two, read it. I mean, you get so much more Shiraishi, which is always going to be a plus for me. But reading it really gives you such a solid story, so much more information than the anime, which, like I said, does cut out a good bit of things. But if you're going to do both, which I highly recommend, read it first, then watch it, and just sit back and really enjoy a really heartwarming, great story to its fullest. So those are my final thoughts. Like I said, read it, then watch it if you haven't already. If you're still here at this point in the video and you haven't done either of those things, you've already learned a huge spoiler for the series. But nevertheless, don't let that deter you on your journey to reading and watching the series. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for today. So I will be back next weekend as well with another video. And as always, like, subscribe, and give me as much feedback as you can down in the comments below. Let me know if you like the story or what I talked about today. Let me know if you want to see more on this series. And of course, constructive criticism always definitely welcome down below as well. So again, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week with another video. Thank you and goodbye.